In this video, I'm going to do a UX content review for the SaaS product Aftership and show you why doing this kind of exercise yourself can make you a better UX writer. Hey guys, welcome to UX Hero, the home of UX writing on YouTube. And today I thought I'd show you how I do a content review for websites and apps. This is something that new, aspiring, and experienced UX writers should be doing fairly regularly, not just to scope out the competition, but it helps keep your skills sharp and helps train your designer's eye. If you were to go into more detail, this could also serve as the basis for a case study if you're an aspiring UX writer. By being able to objectively assess somebody else's work helps you better evaluate your own work objectively. And when you do come across something that you think was not handled particularly well, hopefully you'll be better prepared if you come across the same kind of scenario in your own work. The more designs and content that you're exposed to, hopefully the better prepared you'll be. Before we dive in, I just want to give a quick disclaimer and an explanation as to the process I'm going to be using today. UX design and UX writing should be built on a foundation of testing and research. I don't know what research and testing Aftership have done, and so some of my opinions might not align with the research and testing that they have done. That being said, we're going to try and keep it as objective as possible. So without access to any data, any research and testing that Aftership have done, what value is there in doing this kind of review? How are we going to keep it objective? Well, we're going to do what's known as a heuristic evaluation method, and I'll leave a link down below to the Nielsen-Norman Group's heuristics for UX design, and I'll be doing a video in future on the heuristics for UX writing. Now, heuristic evaluations are not specific usability guidelines. These are just general, broad rules of thumb. That being said, it's a good way of measuring how well a website works when stacked up against usability standards, industry best practices. And so that's how we're going to keep it as objective as possible. This is also the method I use to do a quick review of somebody else's work who's writing for me. You want to make your changes and opinions as objective as possible. You don't want to be making subjective changes to writers on your team. You want to keep it as objective as possible, and the best way to do that is to measure it against usability best practices. Now, another reason this is an important skill to have is that for a lot of you out there, you're not going to have access to the same kind of research and testing that UX design do. In fact, a lot of companies don't invest enough time and money into UX design research and testing, never mind UX writing. And so for a lot of you out there, measuring your work against industry best practices is going to be the next best thing. Obviously, this is not a replacement for proper research and testing. Typically, this is just one step in the review process. However, if you don't have access to research and testing, this is going to be the next best thing, taking your content and measuring it against industry best practices. I am going to do another video on how to do guerrilla free research and testing. Again, that would not be as good as proper research and testing, but it's another thing you can do if you're not being given the same sort of research and testing resources that design are. Right, disclaimers out of the way. We're going to keep it as objective as possible using industry best practices. Let's dive in. Okay, here we are on the Aftership homepage. As I mentioned, it's a SaaS product. They provide shipment tracking information to online retailers, allowing these online retailers to show that tracking to their customers. So we just want to be aware of that as we're going in. It's a B2B product. Their customers are online retailers, possibly people that have stores on Shopify, etc. So we just want to be aware of that when we're evaluating the content and the tone. Right off the bat, I think you'll agree it's a very clean design, very modern, good use of negative space, good use of colors. I'm not overwhelmed by anything. I think this is a good time to mention the aesthetic usability effect, which says that designs which are aesthetically pleasing are perceived to be more usable. And so just by having a good, clean design like this makes the website seem more professional, more polished, and a lot easier to use. Okay, let's move up to the top left here. So let's start with these navigation bars. Typically you want one navigation bar, and this for me is where the problems begin. So if we look at this top left corner, I'm on aftership.com. However, we've got Automizely at the very top. Now I don't know what Automizely is, and it's not explained what the relationship between these two is. Okay, just by having a quick look around, I've found that Automizely is what appears to be the name of the company. Aftership is just one of their products. They've also got Aftership Returns, they've also got Postmen, and they've also got a bunch of Automizely branded products. And so this for me is where the problems really begin. So this is a question of, are you a branded house or are you a house of brands? And there's no right or wrong answer here, but I think Automizely and Aftership need to sit down and decide which end of this spectrum they're on, because right now their website doesn't seem to fit any of these four profiles. They've got a bunch of Automizely products which would fit under the branded house. However, Aftership seems to be completely unrelated to the name Automizely, which would fit the House of Brands model. Automizely being the name of the house, Aftership being one of their products. However, as I mentioned, we've got a ton of Automizely branded products, which seem to be more like branded house. You can have some kind of variation within the middle, that's perfectly fine. But as it stands, I don't think Aftership and Automizely fit into any traditional model. Now you might be saying, what does that have to do with UX writing? And to a certain degree, I agree. However, if we move over to the right hand side, you can see how it's affecting the job of the UX writer. This dual branding, which is affecting this navigation system, is affecting the information architecture of the site. And UX writers really need to be involved with information architecture, because how the website is structured is going to affect how you explain it, what you label different parts of the site. And so you really need to be working with your information architect, which is typically a UX designer, when these decisions are made. Let me just explain what I mean. Before we dive into any of these words in particular, let's move over to the login here. Now this is the first problem. This really should be a verb. It should be two words, login. It's very rare to see them put together and used in the noun form like this. Login as a noun would be the login page, not to log in. And it's far more common to see login, the action, the verb, than login, one word, the noun. So that's a UX writing issue. However, in terms of information architecture, where is the sign up? We've got a login button here, but we don't have a sign up. Now you might be saying, well, it's that big orange button. However, the login is on the Automizely level of things. This sign up, this get started, is for Aftership. So it appears that I can log in to Automizely, but I can't sign up. And I can sign up for Aftership, but I can't log in. And so this dual branding that they've got on the left-hand side, while it might look innocent, is really making a mess of things on the right-hand side. It's really making navigation more complicated than it needs to be. And if we click on one of these, let's just click on login for Automizely and see what happens. So there we go. This is an Aftership branded page. Now I clicked on login to Automizely. We've been redirected to an Aftership branding page. You can see how things get complicated and confusing, unnecessarily confusing. Before we go back, I'm just going to point out a couple of things on this page. This carousel is ridiculously fast. If anybody can read these sentences that fast, you're a quicker reader than me. This is unnecessarily fast. Now, if we look on the left-hand side, we've got login as a verb. Now, I would recommend that you, on the home page, use the verb form as well. Just keep things unified. Into should also be two words, not one word. That's grammatically incorrect, just at the top there. Log into, not log into. Okay, now we're back on the home page. Let's just click on the get started. Let's see what happens when we sign up for Aftership. Yeah, it's not really surprising. We're on an Aftership branded page, and so that for me is the issue. Are you Aftership or are you Automizely? Are you hoping to promote the Automizely brand or the Aftership product? And this is something that management, UX design, and UX writing really need to sit down and have a think about. How are they going to project a unified brand? Are they going to promote Aftership and Automizely at the same time? Because if you look at a brand like Sprite, which belongs to the Coca-Cola company, you don't see Coca-Cola branding on the Sprite website. Same with the P&G products. Yes, on the back of the packaging, you're going to see P&G, but it's not there front and center. And so while this is not directly related to UX writing, it's definitely having an effect on the information architecture of the site. Okay, we're back on the home page. Let's just have a look at this section above the fold. I've mentioned the problem with the login as a noun rather than a verb. Another issue I've got down here is this features section. Remember, this is a navigation bar. You want to be putting things here that people are going to be coming to regularly. If you click on features, these are key selling points. These are not parts of the website that people are going to navigate to. Now, if I click on these, it takes me to a separate page where this KSP is explained in detail. However, again, this is not a navigation element. You don't really want to be putting this on your navigation bar. These should be things that are somewhere on your home page that I can click away to find more information if I need, but they're certainly not a navigation element. Now, again, this is not necessarily UX writing, but as a UX writer, you want to be involved as much as possible with the UX design of a site. Okay, before we scroll down, let's just have a look at this section above the fold. I'm going to leave the navigation bars at the top. I don't really want to nitpick. We want to keep it as objective as possible. Those 2 points that I've pointed out, I think could be optimized. In terms of the dual branding, that really needs to be sorted out, whether it's blowing up the Aftership logo and putting by Automizely or an Automizely product and combining the two navigation bars, or just getting rid of Automizely altogether. That needs to be decided by management as well as UX design. Alright, let's jump into this section above the fold. Make post-purchase the best part of customer experience. I think this is a good size font. It really draws my eyes in. However, the actual words, I think, are kind of missing the point of Aftership. I don't think post-purchase being the best part of customer experience is really what online retailers want. I think if the best part of the customer experience is post-purchase, then that online retailer is doing something wrong. And again, I'm not sure this is really a KSP for Aftership's target audience. We've got a lot of features up here. We've got a lot of features up here. Branded tracking page. Maybe that would be a stronger KSP. I don't know. However, I don't feel this. I don't think it's speaking directly to Aftership's target audience. All right, this next section for me comes across a little bit too strong. Delight your customers with automated shipment tracking. I'm sure the people at Aftership are very passionate about what they do, but I don't think any customer is going to be delighted with automated shipment tracking. And another problem I have with this is, again, who is this speaking to? That's not something that the online retailers necessarily care about. What they care about is this latter part, increase brand loyalty and drive more sales. That's the selling point. You've buried that at the end of this sentence. Rather than putting that front and center, you've put something which is a little bit too exaggerated for me. I'm trying to keep this as objective as possible, but this whole section for me, if I was going to improve it, I would say think about who your target audience is. It's online retailers, not their customers. And think about what's important to them. Because out of all this text, for me, the only part that's important is brand loyalty and more sales. Okay, that bit aside, the buttons, get started, it's free. That's something that you might want to A/B test. There's lots of information online about different wording for sign up, it's free. If Aftership have the ability to do A/B testing for UX content, I think that's something that would be worth testing. Contact sales. I know it's a B2B product, but for me, this feels a little bit cold. I think Contact Us might be a little bit more welcoming. If I just click on this to see where it takes us. Okay, contact sales. However, this bit, talk to our product expert, I feel is a lot more human. Again, I know this is a B2B product, I know it's a SaaS product, but I feel like it could be a little bit more human. I think the main problem I have is I'm not sure what the brand voice is here. We've got this section that is a little bit over the top, and then we've got this really cold messaging of contact sales down here. Again, it's B2B, but that doesn't mean your language has to be cold. I'm not saying that. I think this whole section needs to be toned down a little bit, focus on the KSP for the actual online retailers. I think a quick fix for this would just be Contact Us. I feel like that's just a little bit more human and not as pushy as Contact Sales. But let's move on. Let's go below the fold. Okay, let's scroll down a little bit. Trusted by 10,000 retailers and counting. Yeah, that's pretty good. Got some good social proof here. That's unusual. Can you see how my pointer's changing here for eBay and Etsy? So it seems like I can click on these two. Let's just see where that takes us. Okay, so we're taken to another page about social proof, but I find it very unusual that two of those buttons I can click on, the rest I can't. I'm wondering if that's programming error. But yeah, very unusual that I can click on two and not the others. Okay, moving on. Everything you need for the best tracking experience. Yeah, I don't really have any problem with this section. Shipping visibility. Again, we've got some KSPs here, but I'm not seeing these on the section above the fold. This might be something that they want to look at. Are these things that actually should be pushed in that first message? Especially branded tracking page. Maybe that's actually something that sellers care about, as opposed to delighting people with a tracking service. I don't really have a problem with this section. I think the graphics are quite nice. I don't have any problem with this text. I think it's clear. Yeah, let's move on. Okay, as I scroll down, we have partnered with 915 carriers. I don't know how you feel about this, but we have partnered with 915 carriers. Feels very passive to me. Doesn't feel as strong as anything else on the site. It certainly doesn't feel like a sentence that should be a title. I feel like integration made easy is a lot stronger than this sentence. This is more like an explanation. It's not really a KSP. Again, I'm trying not to nitpick. I'm trying to be as objective as possible, but at least the wording here could maybe be improved a little bit. We have partnered with just feels a little bit passive. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, works well with other platforms. Again, this feels a little bit weak. It's not as strong as the section above the fold, and I don't really want something that works well. I want something that works great. So for me, these two sections could be improved a little bit. I know I'm nitpicking, but if you're going to write something on your homepage, it wants to be the best it can be. And for me, this is just a little bit weak. But let's keep going. Enterprise grade platform and industry compliance, that's a bit of a mouthful. I feel the further down we get, the weaker these titles are becoming. Okay, so this is interesting. I'm just going to point something out. This is a typography issue, but it's something as a UX writer that you should be aware of. It's something that UX and UI designers really need to catch, however, they sometimes don't. As a UX writer, we treat our text as something to be read. We don't treat it as a visual element. That being said, you really should be treating it as a visual element sometimes, not just how does it read, but how does it look. And if we look here, can you see on some of these blocks of text, we've got one word just hung on the end here. This is called a runt. Some people call it widows. I prefer runt because there's another typography issue that I call a widow, but you really don't want a single word or a couple of words just hanging on the end on their own line like this. What you want to do is adjust the spacing between the letters and either push this word over or contract it so this word bumps up onto the line above. You can see that these, where you've not got one word just stuck on the end, just look a lot more professional, a lot cleaner. You really don't want runts like this. Again, UI designers should really be catching this, but as a UX writer, when you're checking your work, when it's gone live, if you spot anything like this, you want to be speaking to whoever's in charge of that, UX or UI, and asking them to change the letter spacing for that block of text. You don't want to adjust the size of the text, and if possible, you don't really want to be adding or removing words. However, as a UX writer, you do have that right. Maybe you can add a word on, maybe you can remove a word. The quickest fix is just to change the spacing. Now, before I move on, I don't want to do a complete deep dive. I'm just pointing things out that might be useful to you in your work. If you notice this section here on APIs, this is something you really want to be careful of. You really want to understand your audience. Do they know what APIs are? Or are they going to be put off by this technical language? Not terribly difficult, but smaller online retailers might find that this is confusing. So you really want to be careful of how you word this. 24/7 support is good, but keep this text as simple as possible. You don't want to put anybody off by including technical jargon, as simple as it may be. Okay, moving down, we've got some more social proof here. However, we've got unusual capitalization. Can you see that the S is capitalized here? However, it's not, and the A in Aftership. So I'm wondering if this has gone through some kind of rebranding. As a UX writer, and the designers really should have caught this. Whenever there's rebranding or renaming, you want to go through your entire site, especially the section on the home page. There's really no excuse for the home page to have the old branding on, if that's what it is. Again, it's not the end of the world, but we've got a section down here. We've got it twice here. I'm just going to click on another one and see. Yeah, it's everywhere. So I'm wondering if originally it was capital A, capital S, and it went for all lowercase. If this happens and you do go through a rebranding, just make sure that you catch all these. Just makes your site and your branding a lot stronger. Okay, scrolling down. Okay, we're towards the bottom of the page now. Boost customer retention with a branded tracking experience. I don't know about you, but for me, that's a much stronger sentence than what we've got at the top. Make post-purchase the best part of customer experience. That for me is way too strong. If you just replace that with boost customer retention with a branded tracking experience or something similar, I feel like this is a lot more on brand and a lot more on point. It speaks to who the customers are. Maybe it's personal preference. I'm trying to keep this objective, but I feel like this is a lot clearer. It tells me instantly what Aftership is about, and it speaks to me, the online retailer. Oh, I can boost customer retention. So if I was at Aftership, if I was the writer, I would be thinking, how can I improve this section at the top? And having a look through these features, seeing what the actual key selling points are, and if they're actually addressed in this section here. Okay, just as a little bonus, we're going to go a little layer deeper. If you are doing a content review, there's two parts of a website or an app that I advise you look at, and one of them is pricing, the other is FAQ. The reason that I recommend these areas of a site or an app is that there's usually quite complicated information here, and this is a good way to gauge how well the UX designers and UX writers have managed to distill that information and make it understandable. So let's dive into the pricing section here and just see what we've got. Okay, again, greeted with a very clean page. The only problem I have is this sentence. So it's front and center, and I'm guessing this was a UX design template. Somebody said we need a title and a subtitle. I'm going to leave this up to you. Do you think this sentence is needed? Does it actually tell you anything? Does it make you want to try Aftership? Or does this sentence down here actually say more? That's how I evaluate content. Does this do anything for the brand? Does it do anything for this page in particular? In my opinion, no. It's empty marketing words. And you could just replace it with something that's a lot stronger, telling me that it's free for 7 days. Now again, there's no right or wrong, but I would just question, what is this sentence doing? Does it actually tell me anything that the rest of the site doesn't? Is it a strong enough sentence to have so large on this pricing page? In my opinion, no. If we move down a little bit, I think this section is well laid out. I know this is pretty standard now, but I have seen some sites that have managed to butcher this section, so props to the UX design for not messing this section up. It's very clear. We've got good wording for the names of each level. Yeah, I think this is well presented. If we look down here, what I do like is we've got these key selling points here, what's included, and as I hover over them, I've got more information. Again, if we look here, access to 915 carriers, I feel like this is a lot stronger than the wording we had on the landing page, which was partnered with. It seems very passive. This is a lot more active, in my opinion. I think this would be better on the landing page, on the home page. But all in all, I like this. I like these hovers here. There's more information if I need it. I don't have to click over onto another site. One other thing I'm going to point out, and this is the bane of the UX writer's existence, which is naming of products and features. And you can see here where it's kind of gone wrong. If you need to name something and then you need to explain it right afterwards in brackets like this, then you need to question whether this name is actually doing its job. If you're asked to name a product or a new feature and it doesn't tell the user anything and it needs to be explained, that's not a good name. People spend more time on other people's sites unless you're something like YouTube. So when you name a feature, if it's not instantly recognizable, every time the user comes to your website, they're going to have to remind themselves, what is that feature? Because the name tells them nothing. And again, this is a good UX design principle, but it applies to UX writing very well. And that's recognition, not recollection. You want people to recognize instantly what it is. You don't want to have them to recall, what was it? What was that explanation? So for me here, this is a perfect example of naming gone wrong, where they've had to explain it right afterwards in brackets. It's got a further pop-up, but if you've got the name of a feature and then you've got to explain it in another way in brackets, that's not a good name. Right, I'm just going to scroll past this section and get straight to the FAQs. But before I click on Help Center, I just want to point out the word uptime. Again, this is not to nitpick on people's work, but my question would be, how many people actually know what uptime is? Maybe people that work in UX design, UX writing know, but does the audience of Aftership actually know what the word uptime means? This is something that you could probably test with. Okay, scrolling down here, I'm just going to go straight to the FAQ section. And before we actually go into the Help Center, I just want to point out the word uptime and ask how many of you know what the word uptime means? And if you do know, do you think online retailers, do you think the audience of Aftership know what uptime means? This is something I'm not going to judge. This is something you want to do with some free online research. You want to be looking through forums and things that your audience are using to see if anybody mentions this word. If they do know what it is, great. But again, I think maybe the majority of people, especially smaller online retailers, will probably not know what uptime is. And as a UX writer, it's your job to be using the language that your users use. You know, this is very similar to the API on the homepage. You really want to be careful of what words you're using, and maybe I'm scrutinizing it a little bit too heavy here, but this is just to remind you, when you're looking through your own work, are you using words that your audience are familiar with? Again, we've got Aftership with the capitalization here. This is something that they really need to go through and just clean up. It wouldn't take long to just find these instances. We've got another one down here, but it just makes the whole site look a lot more polished. Okay, let's just click on Help Center here, see where it takes us. Again, this is something that if you are looking at content, if you are doing a content review, it's a great section to look at, very similar to pricing, because you've got complicated information that needs to be simplified and distilled. Now this looks like it was built slightly separately. The branding looks a little bit different, the color's different. We've got the new name up here with lowercase, but then we've got the uppercase again down here. So yeah, it's all over this uppercase, lowercase. Again, this is not the end of the world. Nobody's going to stop using this website because of this uppercase, lowercase, but this is how you present yourself to the world. You want it to be as polished as possible. I think the overall layout of this section is very neat. You know, it's very well presented. if we do click on one, maybe let's just have a look on this updating pending statuses, see where it takes us. Okay, I've just had a quick read through this so you don't have to watch me reading it, and there's a few errors with this text. We've got sort of this word that's cut across lines here. It really doesn't need to be. We've got a few missing articles, if pending status, if a pending status, if the pending status. We've got the uppercase problem here. We've got it's with an apostrophe where it doesn't need one. So there's a few things that could be cleaned up here, especially with this being relatively recently updated. One of the bigger problems I have is the top left here. We've got truncated text. This is something you really want to be going through and checking. Your UX designers should be aware of this as well. If I do click on this, I'm not sure why there's an arrow and a button, but if I click on this, let's just see where it takes us. So it's taking me to this page, but you can see in this box it's presented perfectly fine. So there's no reason for it to be truncated on the previous page. Now this kind of thing does happen, but as a UX writer, UX designer, even a programmer, whoever's doing testing really needs to be on top of this. It clearly does fit, so I'm not sure why it was truncated on the previous page. Again, not the end of the world, but if we go back there, I don't know what this word is. Tracking there's no way of knowing what this word is, and so this might as well not be here. You might as well just have an arrow. Okay, just trying to get back to Aftership. I'm guessing if I click go to website, that's a little bit confusing. Go to dashboard, go to website. I'm wondering if this should be go to homepage or something, but go to website. Am I not on a website here? This wording is a little bit strange. If I click it, it's opened a new tab. So that's interesting. But yeah, if you are doing a content review, pricing and FAQ sections are great places to look to see how well a UX writer can distill complicated information. Okay guys, so that's the homepage, the pricing page, and the FAQ. I'm not going to go any deeper than that. I think that gives you a good idea of the areas that I look at and I advise you to look at when you're doing a content review, whether it's somebody else's work or even your own work. Overall, I think the Aftership page is pretty clean. I think the design is very well done. I wasn't confused particularly by any of the text. However, there are a few areas that could be tidied up just to give the site a more polished and professional look. We've got the dual branding at the top, which is influencing information architecture. That really needs to be sorted. We've got the old branding of the capital A, capital S in Aftership. We've got some grammar issues on the FAQ pages. We've got unclear key selling points, especially on the section above the fold, whereas we saw content on other parts of the site that maybe would lend itself better to appear front and center above the fold. This is something that a UX writer maybe wants to sit down with branding, marketing, whoever, and think, what are the key selling points? Who is our audience? Because for me, some of that content was speaking to not Aftership's audience, but the online retailer's audience, the final customer. You really need to think about, what do your audience care about? Do they care about delighting their customers with automated shipment tracking? Or do they care about brand loyalty and driving sales? This is something you might want to play around with. Going strong, go with the lead, don't bury it. And then finally, we've got some UI elements. We've got truncated text. We've got the runts, the words just hanging on the end. These are things that you just want to tidy up. It just makes your website look a lot more professional, just that little bit more polished. Okay guys, I hope that's been useful for you to see how I review UX content and maybe giving you some ideas as to things to look out for in your own work. I will be doing more content reviews in future, but if you've got any websites or apps you think I should check out, leave them in the comments below and I'll catch you in the next one.